Look, if you put up the cost of national insurance, if you impose hundreds of pages of extra red tape on employers, and if you allow the minimum wage for young people in particular to run far ahead of inflation, then this is precisely what you will get. Unemployment's gone up now almost every month since this government took office. And a particular tragedy is the rate of youth unemployment. Young people deserve their shot of life, just can't get a chance because of the state of the employment market. Well, as Wes Streeting said, the government simply doesn't have a plan for economic growth. Conservatives would cut red tape, we'd lower the ruinously high energy costs that's making business uncompetitive. We'd have a simpler tax system with things like taking businesses out of business rates entirely for the smallest businesses. We've got to get this country growing again. Only the Conservatives understand business. In fact, this government that laid the front bench, the cabinet, has got less experience than your average intern in the House of Commons gift shop.
Well, I was at Primark just ahead of the budget where we announced that we were going to take action on low-value imports, something welcomed by Primark and also many other retailers who are undercut by foreign importers who are not paying customs duty on what they bring into the country. So far from working against business, we are working in conjunction with business to grow our economy. Our economy exceeded expectations for growth last year, and I'm confident we will do the same this year too.
What we're looking at is making sure that young people actually, believe in their country. They feel that there's no hope. A lot of young people are actually leaving. Putting on a compulsory national service at a time when we're not creating employment for young people, I think is the wrong way around. Our offer for young people is to make sure they can get into jobs, believe in their country, see that this is a place that gives them opportunity, hope, where they're able to start a family, buy a home. That's why we have policies to abolish stamp duty. That's what we need to do right now. Show them that there is hope. Then they'll want to fight for their country. But if we're not giving them anything except youth unemployment, why should they believe in us?
Do you think young people aren't patriotic enough at the moment and you can change that?
No, I haven't said that at all. What I think is that we are not giving young people a good enough deal. Unemployment has risen every single month since Labour came into office. They are losing employment because of the jobs tax, because of the changes that Labour made to thresholds. It's too expensive to employ young people. So let's do right by them.
Yeah, it was wrong to deny democracy. It was clearly, now we find out, illegal. The government couldn't defend their own actions. I don't know what the civil service in the department were doing when ministers were trying to break the law. And I'm pleased elections are going ahead. But the other U-turn that they should be making is stopping their top-down imposition of local government reorganisation. At a time we've got rising unemployment, the defence budget isn't properly funded, the grooming gangs inquiry hasn't even started. There are much bigger fish to fry than Labour's fetish for local government reorganisation. Well, I hope he thanked Conservatives for voting against every time the government's tried to bring this forward in Parliament. We would have done so again had they done so. And I think of about 15 U-turns that have been performed by this government, when it's not his own backbenches, over a dozen of them have been forced by the Conservatives. So, look, we've got an important job to oppose this government. That's our audition, our apprenticeship, if you like, with the British people to one day be a government of this country. And today's unemployment figures just show how desperately badly a government that can be trusted on the economy is needed. Well, and in a democracy, I hope that everything's up for grabs in an election. And, Conservative councillors generally have a good track record of keeping rates down, focusing on the things that matter to people rather than charging off about climate and Palestine. But we'll see. Not a single candidate's been nominated and a single vote has been cast. Let's see what the electorate decide in the local elections. This is just terrible, terrible stuff that you think you read about for other countries. Here we've got a government that's suspending trial by jury, deleting old court records, locking up people for Facebook posts, and now commissioning hit jobs on respected independent journalists. I mean, there's a very, very worrying pattern of behaviour here, and it's time for the government to come completely clean.
Well, it was extraordinary. I mean, last year we saw cancellations of elections without any real exceptional reason. This year, up to 30 councils, 4.6 million people denied the vote. In some cases, Norfolk, Suffolk, East and West Sussex, this would have been the second year in a row that people who are paying their council tax would have been denied the chance to vote. So that's why we took them to the High Court. We were due there this Thursday. They've caved, they've collapsed. It's a victory for reform, but more importantly, it's a victory for democracy in this country. We are delighted.
As you say, you felt so strongly about this, you were going to take the government's court over this. The fact that they have U-turned on this before you got your day in court, what do you make of that, and why did you feel strongly enough to take them to court in the first place?
Well, I think the principle of no taxation without representation is a very well-known one through political history, and that's what was happening here. We'd even seen a few people starting to refuse to pay their council tax up and down the country. But what I do think now is the Minister, Steve Reed, has clearly acted illegally, and given that the government has now given in, knew they'd lose to us in court, I think Steve Reed's question as a minister should now be debated.
The government have also said this afternoon they're going to be paying your legal fees. How much are your legal fees?
Zero now, because the government are going to pay them. So, yeah, we took a risk on this. We took a risk on this, but we knew it was the right thing to do. I thought we'd get a partial victory. I thought ones that were delayed for a second year in a row, we'd probably win that. But this is now a complete victory, and there'll be a lot of people up and down the country very grateful to us. Think about it. The Lib Dems were delaying in Cheltenham, the Conservatives delaying in Harlow and the other counties where they'd postponed last year as well. The rest of them were Labour, mostly in the north of England. It's a big win.
Firstly, with the Secretary of State stop saying this is a locally led process. The power rests solely with him, and each of these delays is his decision and his decision alone. Secondly, the real question here is why to delay for a second year. When I was Secretary of State, the legal advice that I received, including from Sir James Eadie, the government's chief legal advisor, was that it was not legally sustainable to delay for a second year. Hence, we didn't. Even during COVID, we kept the elections going, did not delay for 2 years. What the Secretary of State is doing is almost certainly illegal. If he's so confident of his position, publish his legal advice and publish the legal advice that I received and the Prime Minister when we decided not to delay for a second year. Then we might be able to have faith in what he's saying.
Secretary of State.
As I say, he was, of course, the Secretary of State who failed to act on eliminating the waste that came from duplication and allowed this two-tier system to continue with millions and millions of pounds of council taxpayers' money wasted on duplicate councillors, duplicate chief executives, duplicate finance directors, instead of ploughing that money into frontline services. In those areas where he was, those few occasions where he was brave enough to take a decision, he imposed. By contrast, I have asked and I have responded. But the reasons he gave were the right ones. His words: elections in such circumstances risk confusing voters and would be hard to justify where members could be elected to serve shortened terms. He got it right for once. He should be proud of himself.
Sir Alex Shalbrook.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do have concerns, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the undermining of democracy. Not least, there have been members in the House who have always insisted on by-elections from defections and now appear to be running away from the electorate. But may I ask whether the Secretary of State can absolutely dissociate himself from comments made by members of the governing party who could not confirm, when asked 3 times, that the general election would never be delayed?
Secretary of State.
There is no question in ordinary circumstances for a general election to be delayed. It's only ever happened in cases of national emergency, and that remains the case.
Andrew Rosendale.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree with the Right Honourable Member for Chorley, who has said that these elections should go ahead. Indeed, democracy delayed is democracy denied. In the past, when there has been a delay to local elections, I can't remember it ever being longer than 1 year. When Margaret Thatcher rightly abolished the GLC elections were extended, the term of the GLC was extended by 1 year only, never longer than 1 year. 2 or 3 years is a complete denial of democracy, and quite clearly a way of Labour to avoid humiliating defeats on the 7th of May. But as they're going to be delayed, would the Secretary of State please consider allowing the people of Havering to have a choice as to whether we could become part of Greater Essex instead of Greater London.
Secretary of State.
Well, I would remind him that his party did the same thing in the same circumstances, his former party, I should say, because he walked out on them last week. Proposals about what happens in Essex are currently subject to consultation. He's more than entitled to make his views known.